Hello and welcome to the Great Minds Together podcast,
where we explore neurodiversity, mental health, inclusive practice and the lived experiences that drive positive change.
Each episode we speak with inspiring young people, parents, professionals and change makers who are shaping the world of neurodiversity, SEND policies and everything in between.
Whether you're a parent, practitioner, young person or simply passionate about inclusion,
you're in the right place.
So, with that being said,
let's get into today's conversation. Hello and welcome to the new series of the Great Minds Together podcast. I am Emma Mander, the CEO of Great Minds.
And I'm Lucy Dimond, the Executive Director at Great Minds Together.
And we're going to talk today, aren't we, just about our journey really up to today. And we're on a bit of a step change in respect of the work that we do and obviously trying to navigate the differences that we're seeing in the system all the time. I think it'll be a really good time to kind of reflect on all of the changes and the reasons why they come about and then talk about our vision for change going forward. You know, we kind of really know our route now, don't we? And we're making a lot of headway with that. But I think it'd be great for you to kind of talk through your experiences with GMT because you've been with us from when we were a relatively small organisation right through to now where we are moderately medium sized, I would say.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a role that you've not done.
No, obviously started as admin just over 3 years ago. Well, coming up for 4 years in September. And then anything that came my way, I sort of had a go at, which was really nice to be able to do it that way. So moved into the manager role after family wraparound coordinator. Then on to a deputy head of service, and now
director of pretty much everything.
Yeah, whatever happens that day is what I get stuck in with, which is, I enjoy it like that. I like a bit of variety.
And it's really hard, isn't it, to like keep our core values intact as we grow, because when we're relatively small, it was quite easy. Everybody was on the same page and, you know, you're surrounded by, you know, close-knit group of people. But as we grow and we get more people and that grows continuously, trying to keep that intact. And, you know, we tend to sometimes attract people that are not necessarily in line with the values of our organisation. I suppose now really it's quite easy to kind of see that as it, because there's so many of us that are really in line with the values. It stands out, doesn't it, when that happens. But
yeah, I think when you recruit every time, you take on a new group of people who want to support and help families, but they are human beings as well. So then, you know, to move from one role to another into a new organisation that works quite differently to a lot of other places, it's hard for people to adapt to, and maybe they don't always align with it as much as they might have thought they did in the first place, which is fine, you know, if they're not happy with or they don't wish to continue in a role, that, you know, they're more than welcome to move into a new role, a different role, or move on. I think it's just trying to understand people as human beings and try and work with them as best you can, really.
And I think we naturally attract a lot of people from statutory services because they kind of see the work that we're doing and they kind of say, we want to come here because actually you're able to do the work I started out in this role to do, because, you know, in schools and social care and residential and some areas of NHS as well, there's a lot of people who find that they end up in the position that they're not actually doing the role that they went and trained to want to do.
Yeah.
But here we've got a lot more freedom on being able to make that real difference and focus on just keeping the core elements as the focus.
Yeah, certainly a lot of the outreach staff over the few years that I've been involved in the recruitment have come from an education background, and a lot of them have said in their interviews in the first few weeks is that they've always wanted to do more for families but not been able to in the role they're in. You know, they're a TA or
quite restricted,
some sort of support staff in school, and it's like, that's your job done now, it's 3:30, and or, you know, they don't get involved in any of the HCPs or, you know, the work that comes with those children and young people, because that's the SENCO's role or that's the safeguarding lead's role. They do their bit of work in the classroom, they're not able to go any further with it. So I think that's one thing that they do like, to be able to get more involved with the families.
And that's kind of like across the system really. Some of the challenges that we face, it's not just that each sector is operating in a silo, but within each sector you've got silos within itself that isn't translating across the teams, which is therefore not reaching the child as a whole, which is where we then see the impact of that system not being.
I definitely found that working in a school office myself, that, you know, my role was whatever happened within that office, and then it sort of was taken out of my hands and
you kind of
to the
discouraged,
right,
aren't you, to step outside the boundaries of your role in those
absolutely.
services as well.
Certain staff, not all, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then I suppose it's been really quite challenging for you. You know, it'd be interesting to understand your perspective of the world at GMT, because you've kind of navigated with us some really challenging situations over the years. And, you know, as we've kind of changed and adapted and we've hit walls of areas where, you know, that hasn't kind of been embraced by some. And trying to kind of work through those periods of time has been really quite challenging. And I suppose for you, growing with the organisation, navigating that and sort of trying to find your way in that has been quite difficult.
I take every situation as it comes. You know, people are happy or not happy, and I'm happy to work with them and support them through it. If they choose to move on from that, that's also fine. But I think if you come into your day worrying about what might come, you're not going to get through it. So take each situation as it comes and support people through it. I think is the only thing you can do.
And I think it's quite niche, isn't it, the work that we do, especially sort of the crisis side of the organisation, because, you know, it's really, really hard and it's not for everybody. And it's interesting sometimes, you know, we're trying to operate as a fully inclusive organisation and we've got such an amazing team. And I think now we're really in such an amazing place with everybody on board with what we're trying to achieve and the purpose we're trying to achieve. The last few years has taught me a lot about humans. We try continuously to be an inclusive organisation. We obviously train other organisations on how to be inclusive, and we seem to get it quite right, because obviously we do a lot of feedback surveys with staff and they all come back overwhelmingly positive, like the environment is so positive. And, you know, I think that at times, and then it's really nice to see that feedback when it actually does come through on the staff surveys, which, you know, obviously are all anonymous. But it also can be really difficult to be fully inclusive. And I can kind of understand why organisations struggle with that. Something I'm proud of is one of our departments is 100% neurodivergent. And I just think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can understand how some organisations will find that really difficult to manage. Ours is managed by someone who's neurodivergent, which helps.
Yeah.
But I just think, how do we get to a place as a society where we can completely embrace inclusivity without that kind of natural bias coming in? Because it naturally will. And there's been times, you know, and I think it's really important that we talk honestly about some of the controversial aspects of that, where that can be really difficult sometimes, because you're trying to remain inclusive and trying to do your absolute best for everybody. And one of the big things we focus on here is making sure we give the best possible support we can to our staff, which in turn will then help and benefit the children and families. But that can be difficult sometimes as well.
Yeah, it is difficult in the workplace. I think, though, like the question you asked, how do we get to a place in society where it's accepted? And I think that's the young people that we're working with now. I think, you know, supporting them to understand themselves, advocate for themselves, and know that as long as you're going through your life wanting to be kind and do the right thing, that we all fall down and do things sometimes. It's about how you repair that afterwards. They will become the next social workers, the next teachers, the next GPs, the next nurses, doctors, and they will have grown up in a society where it is more accepted and they understand it more. So there will be a natural change in all of those sectors anyway. In the workplace, it is difficult because we do still have to do a job, and it's just about understanding the team around you, and when they might not be performing at the best, how are they going to sort of communicate that to you? How do you respond to it rather than react to it? Again, getting bigger makes that more difficult. You don't get to know people as well. You just don't necessarily come across them all the time. So I think that's probably the bit where you need to sort of focus in on getting to know your staff really well.
And it's got to kind of be literally part of who you are, isn't it? As an organisation, it's got to be ingrained in the values of everybody. And one of our core values is to have balanced perspectives. And I think it's one of the hardest things to achieve on a larger scale, that, because people can individually have that ability and skill set. But it shouldn't just be assumed that everybody's got the ability to have balanced perspectives. And sometimes the neurodiversity can mean that people can't as well. And it's understanding then how to be inclusive, where some of our core values actually can't be adhered to as a result of the neurodiversity elements of it. But I think that's something that we should maybe also focus on with children in schools, because there's so many things that I think would benefit being part of the curriculum that isn't just an add-on or something fluffy that we do in PHSE. In having balanced perspectives and an understanding of other people and their experiences and how that may have impacted their life and then subsequently potentially their behaviours as a result, I think is a really important thing that we should be teaching children from a really young age, because that's mattered a lot here, hasn't it, with our growth and having that understanding of certain ways of things that have gone, and people not being able to demonstrate the ability of having those balanced perspectives sometimes doesn't help the situation.
No, and it is difficult, and I think that's where obviously pet peeve detentions come in, and sitting in a silent room with a member of staff with however many of the children in detention that day for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever that time is, they're not getting anything out of that. What have you done that day? I don't know. Something as silly as worn your coat when you shouldn't have, or maybe speaking to a teacher in a disrespectful way because they've not really understood the situation or had a bad day, whatever that might be. But use that time then to have the conversation with that young person. This is what happened. Why did it happen?
And try and understand what's their day look like. Yeah. And actually what's led up to that. What's happened in the morning. Why would you, sometimes people just get out of bed on the wrong side. We do that as adults, so of course that will happen with children too.
Important is to then reflect on, well, in that situation you felt like this because of this. This is what you could do differently next time if necessary. How did the adult feel in that situation?
How did the adult respond?
How did they respond? Did they have a
How
bad
did
day
their response impact their response?
Yeah, it's understanding everybody's life, isn't it? And although a 5-year-old can't do that, having those conversations from early on help build that ability then when they hit high school, college, workplaces, because they've had those conversations about you're not always going to get the response that is right or that you want, but how do we work with that and make it better? So
yeah. I think what's been really interesting for us as an organisation is that we ended up in a position where we're attempting to kind of change the system and merge different sectors, and education, health and social care, public sector, private sector, VSE sector. And then as we grew, we almost replicated unknowingly the exact kind of same issues we're trying to outwardly solve within our own organisation, which obviously we're working on now. But it is so easy to just fall in line with the conditioning of our society, and pushing against that constantly is also going to continue to bring a lot of challenge. And we're starting to kind of see the impact of that now, because we've had a few experiences lately, haven't we, where obviously we're talking very openly about challenge, and we're bringing challenge professionally but warranted in order to try and highlight the issues within the system and the gaps in the system. And I think we've got it quite right here in the sense, everybody that works here is comfortable with challenge, is comfortable to receive it, and is comfortable to give it to others as well. But you are not working in a world where that is comfortable everywhere. And we're also working in a controversial space and trying to do some things that are quite radical that people don't understand. And they say changing a culture or an environment in a workplace can take 5 years. And what we're trying to do is change a culture and an environment in society. So that's probably going to be a much longer journey than I ever envisioned, because I always think I can achieve things overnight.
Those conversations could be had, we do it professionally, but even in your life, going into hospitals for appointments and seeing things the way staff might be approaching patients, things like that. It's really difficult sometimes to watch it happen and not have anything to say about it. But how do you then have that conversation? It's not your situation to be involved in. Later on, can you go back, have that conversation with a member of staff? There's lots of signs up now around hospitals about how they're inclusive. You can have this additional support beforehand if you know about it, but that isn't offered necessarily at appointment booking time, so you don't know until you get there. So it's communication being sort of fed through all of the departments and all of the hospitals, schools, whatever situation it is, and making sure that everyone is on that same page. I think it's been really nice that you've been coming to the training days recently, so that the staff are getting that time with you to hear from you what your vision was, how you started, where you wanted it to go, and just little reminders at drop-ins like that where you can say, this is the vision. Have you got any questions?
Yeah,
this is why.
I think one of the things that I've noticed lately is that, as you kind of grow as an organisation, it's grown to a level that I never envisaged even being possible. And I've been on my own kind of journey with that, really. And your priorities shift, and your priorities automatically have to shift. And you end up doing a job sometimes. Well, you have to do a job all the time that you never actually started out to do. And there's expectations, there's legal duties where you've got to make decisions about things that are uncomfortable for some people, but right for, the organisation. We had at one point nearly 200 staff. I don't know what the latest count is, but it's a lot. And, they then have to become your priority. You've got no choice. You're in a really important role, and you are legally responsible for making sure that these people's livelihoods remain intact and do the things that you need to do in line with what's right for them, whilst also still trying to achieve the vision, whilst also trying to change the world, whilst also managing your own mental health and well-being. And it's been a really difficult couple of years since we've been going through that growth. And I think I'm really proud that we've got to a place where we can still continue to do that, having learned everything that we've learned. But what has been tricky is that you do get kind of redirected to having to respond to a lot of things that, like I started out with supporting families and, wanting to help schools change the education system, change the way they were delivering certain lessons on a really small scale, and then all of a sudden you're in a CEO role, and I hate that title, but I have to have it because it's my job title now. Having to focus on a lot, and the last sort of 3 to 6 months I've kind of really done a lot of evaluating of how I still do all of the bits that I'm passionate about whilst we're still managing all these important bits that I have to do, but we don't lose sight of where we're going. And that's why joining on things like the training, sharing knowledge of the purpose of why we're doing the things that we're doing. It's not just that I am beating the drum about this system being wrong, and we actually have a vision to change it. And I think trying to get people's understanding of Emma wants to change the system, this is how we're going to change it, this is how we're going to get there, has been difficult to navigate, because in my head I just think that's really easy. This is what we do, this is how we're going to do it. But obviously having lots and lots of people involved in that's how we're going to do it more effectively and more sustainably. I need to communicate that out, probably elements of my own neurodiversity and my challenges with that.
Well, you can see the road in your head.
In my head,
and that there's a lot of other people around you who have different visions and different ways in which they think we can get there. So being able to bring them all together and making sure that we're all on the same page, having a conversation, and maybe sometimes having to bend and flex on what you think it might look like, which is fine. Or us going, no, actually, now you've said that makes sense.
Those ideas are better. Balanced perspective.
That's the only way it's going to work when you've grown like you have. So.
I think what's been interesting, especially since COVID, is we originally wrote a manifesto, the policy paper, and then I've been reviewing that recently because we're going back to Parliament now with that. And, it's taken that long post-COVID to kind of get back to that place where we were on the verge of really making a difference there. But actually, it's been a good thing that it had to get paused, because we've learned so much in the last 5 years of what the actual issues are and what the new issues are as a result of COVID and changes in government and all of those things. And it was really interesting reading the priorities pre-COVID when I originally wrote it to what the priorities are now, and they're so different. And I think the biggest one that we've learned, certainly most recently, when we've known it all along from an education perspective, but from a residential perspective, the Ofsted framework and how rigid that is. And actually, when you kind of look at things, and it generalises this, and I'll probably, cause offence by saying this, but, I'm happy to own it. Overall, the Ofsted framework itself is the problem. And it's there to actually support and regulate and make sure things are safe. But it doesn't really do any of those things across education or residential or social care. What it does is create a lot of professional anxiety, a lot of fear. A lot of things are focused on the paperwork element. There's no human element to it anymore, which we ourselves have experienced now, so we can talk from a fully informed position on that. And I think what's really difficult is the recognition from some Ofsted inspectors that yes, that is actually the case, but the fact that nothing can be done about it because we're just a society that goes along and does things the same way because we've always done it that way. Well, it's the first sign of insanity, doing the same thing every day and waking up and expecting things to be different. And I think the framework itself is it's a framework that is going in and saying these are all the issues. but they're walking away expecting everybody to change something, leaving the same people with the same resources, with the same funding, in the same environment, with no additional support, and expecting it to change, and then goes back and reviews them again. At what point are we going to realise that it might be the framework that needs to change to meet the needs of these children, whether it's a child in crisis, residential, whether it's a child in education, whether it's a child under the social care system? Again, we've got children there that the framework in social care isn't meeting the needs. All of your social care processes are based on children being at risk from their parents, but we see so many times where that is actually the other way around, and the caregiver is the one at risk as a result of unmet need, as a result of education usually. And we've looked at, all of our cases over the last kind of few years, particularly the crisis cases at tier 3.5 level that we do. And I would be quite confident in saying 100% of those children and young people are in crisis as a result of it originating from the education system not meeting their needs. I don't think you can track back on any one of those cases, whether it's outreach, intensive support team or tier 3.5, and the education system not meeting their needs being the core starting point of those challenges.
Well, hence there being a much bigger uptake for the elective home education now. It's much bigger than it was. It's something that there are many communities on Facebook and everywhere else for. There's a lot of influencers that I follow who home educate their children, and it worked really well for. Navigating your work around that can be difficult, but you just make it work because it's the best place, and those children are still socialising in different groups, making friends, learning. I don't think she'll mind me saying, a friend of my son's at school, her mum took her travelling for 13 months to World School there.
Oh, follow her on Instagram now,
She shared it on her Instagram that her daughter's school report, she was above or on track for everything.
You can't really blame the inspectors, you can't blame social workers, you can't blame the teachers, because they're working in a really difficult system. They're under a lot of pressure. They're following all of these rules that don't make sense, but they have to because it's the job to. The problem starts at the top in government, and we need somebody within government that has a role. Like, there's no one person, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. There's no one person in government that's responsible for looking at the kind of cross-systemic working and making sure everything remains consistent, and looking at, how outside of Ofsted, outside of education, all of the ministers that you got for each one, even they're in silo. Where's the person in the middle that links all of that together and go, well, actually, that doesn't work for that and that doesn't work for this? And it's like the new laws that are coming into play. So there's a number of different laws that have come into play in the last year, all of which have been put into place by different people with different agendas or different reasons or different understandings. And all of those laws actually have ended up closing doors, and none of them have spoken to each other. And you've now got children floating around the system. They can't go in hospital if they're autistic because that's now not allowed. They can't be in what's classified as an unregistered placement, which in turn has had an impact on specialist placements because they're automatically categorised now as an unregistered, even though that's not the case to the letter of the law. And there's lots of misunderstanding around that. You've also now got people championing for deprivation of liberty orders not to be utilised as much. But if we close that door, that's the only thing that overrules these ones, and we've not created anywhere for these children to go. So we've closed all of these doors, we've not put anything new in place, but all of these people are getting in trouble if they do any of those things. But well, where are they going then? And you have these conversations and they go, well, I know,
but I can't make the decision on that.
But I can't make a decision on that. I can't get involved in individual cases. And there isn't actually one regulatory body in this country that can make a difference or overrule a situation where an unsafe decision is being made for a child, apart from a judge who also is nervous about doing that, especially when it comes to local authorities. So we're all operating on scary letters, moving children around left, right and centre on scary letters that actually can't be enforced because there's no law in place where they can be. And these children are having more trauma, more attachment difficulties, escalating behaviours. And then when they get to that point of escalation that we've scared everybody to make them move around so much that they're at that point, we're then going, no.
Yep.
Where are they going then? And we calculated, I think there's about over 2,500 children currently in that position in this country. And parents, as a result, and their mental health is suffering, which will then have a longer term impact on our NHS because that will then impact physical health.
on the whole family.
When
Just one
actually, if we
child.
just changed our whole framework on how we're regulating these things and put people in place that can make a difference in those situations and can intervene and go, that isn't okay. That's not okay how that decision is being made, and this actually needs to be different for this child. All links, certainly how education is run, how social care is being regulated, and residential, how it's being regulated, all feed into why our NHS is in such a state, because that's picking up
All the slack
the end
everywhere
of
else.
those situations and struggling to manage
Yeah.
as a result.
So we'll have to start with the early intervention as we always do and hope. I mean, we do obviously get involved in the crisis when it comes as well, but if we had the early intervention everywhere.
We need that redirection of focus, don't we, from local authorities really and schools and helping people to think differently. And I think we're of an age now where we're all talking about this. And I think our children are all experiencing this. So I think as they kind of come through life and get to working age, we will start to see that change naturally, because they'll have all had the experiences that they're experiencing. They'll be then the people in those positions. But what do we do in the void between now and then for all the trauma that's currently being caused?
Pick up the phone and help where we can when they come to us. You know, we've got a few schools that are asking for those early interventions to be supported. We've got families and children who come to us directly on referrals, you know, social workers that refer in. In lots of local authorities, that's still the highest referral is from social care.
Social care and CAMS, isn't it?
Yeah, CAMS. A lot of the time it's a parent referral but signposted by, so they've not made the referral themselves. It's, you know, the professional might have suggested to parents to make that referral. But yeah, just keep picking it up when it comes until we've helped support all those young people to change the world in the next generation.
Yeah, I think what's really tricky as well is that we've got, you know, everybody's in agreement that we need to be looking at prevention and early intervention. And there was a time years ago, maybe 2 decades ago, where that was very much a focus. But I think we've got that much crisis now. It's supporting
100%.
local authorities and ICBs to manage that funding effectively, because there is a lot of funding. You know, people talk, and again, it'd be quite a controversial thing to say, but I can say it from a fully informed position, having worked with a number of ICBs and local authorities on their own balance sheets, and that there is money. It's just not being directed to the right areas. It's also not always being managed by the right people that have got the right experience and knowledge to manage budgets. And I think that's the problem nationally in how the funding is being managed and where it's being directed to. There is a way in which you can apportion funding to early intervention at the same time as managing crisis. But I think people are just concentrating on the things that are coming their way, and they're just fighting fires constantly, especially in local authorities, that they just need to kind of reduce that pressure, reduce those scary letters.
Yeah.
We're all operating on what other people might say that actually can't get involved when it really matters. So to me, I feel like it just looks so easy to solve. And, you know, what I'm really excited about the most recent project that you're working on as well, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, because that should really give us a starting point as a baseline of look how it could be done.
Well, that's a local authority or a whole ICB on board.
Yeah.
They're wanting the same change, basically.
And that's the difference, isn't it? Because like one thing that we've learned is this system is all dependent on people and relationships, and it shouldn't be that way. And I had actually a meeting last week with a technology company, Mander, who have got some amazing software, and we were looking at how we can integrate some of that into the changes that we're trying to make in the system, because actually one of the things that's missing for that level of consistency is the software element, because everyone works on different softwares. But also what we've seen is that this system can't be fixed by humans. And we're about to go into this whole world that everyone's really scared of AI and or technology and all of this. You know, we're in technology, but you know, it's going to a new level, isn't it, again? And I think we really need to be looking at how we can make use of that for the benefit of this system, because it is still operating really archaically. Everybody is still on different software programs. It is based on people and personalities and relationships. So how do we get something in place that everybody can follow? That it doesn't matter what person is dealing with that, it's that it has the same positive outcome for the child, because we can see two ends of the country, two very different experiences. We've got, you know, a really challenging experience with one local authority who shall not be named. And then you've got another end of the country who are so on board and understanding. And there's like two types of people in this system, people that get it and the people that don't. And when you get a team of people that get it. The difference for the cohort of children and families in those areas is night and day. And I remember we had that meeting with the directors of the ICB, and they were talking because they'd seen our conference, and they were sort of saying, we want your sufficiency agenda, what you're doing across to try to merge all of the sectors and everything that you talked about, and I was like, well, if you want all of it, like, how brave are you? Because I will want to do some quite radical things and move away from a system that everybody's been used to working in. And you were in that meeting, and there was like, no, we're absolutely on board. And we walked away from that, didn't we, going, do you think they really mean it? And
did they know what everything is?
Yeah, did they know what that's going to look like? And they've proven that they did. And it's so refreshing to work with people who are like-minded, who can see the end goal, can see what we're trying to do. But it's really sad that we're working in a world where when you're trying to do something good, it's looked at as if it's suspicious.
Yeah, I think the most positive part of that was, although we had that meeting with the directors, then going out and meeting all of those people on the ground and still meeting with them regularly for different meetings. I've not come across anyone yet that's gone, no, we don't want that. We don't need that. We're fine as we are. They're all, as a whole, ICB, we've had a really positive experience.
Really positive.
And if there has been questions, or I don't really understand, or I don't think that'll work, it's been, I don't think it'll work because, or I'll try it, or what about this? Because they know their ICB best.
And the difference, though, between ICBs and the local authorities is also really evident, but also difference within the local authorities, because you've got 4 areas down there. So you've got 2 really good, really on board, really kind of like, let's work together. How do we do that? And then you've got 2 who operate so differently and are so used to those kind of fixed ways of working. It's been really interesting to navigate that. I'm still navigating that.
It's a bit like going back to your staff all being different human beings. It's how we can support them as individuals, but then still bring them back together to work really well together, because ultimately it only impacts then those families, children, young people living close to borders, cross-border. If we can work with them to all understand each other and work really well together, it's only going to impact everybody else.
I think that's what gives us the confidence as well to be able to do that, like on a much smaller scale. But we've been through our own challenges, and that's why I thought it was really important to talk about that at the beginning, because we've navigated that difficulty too. We end up falling into those same challenges ourselves naturally, because it's society. It's what happens. You conform, it automatically happens. But having got to a place where we've kind of got that right, or as right as we'll probably ever get it. We just need to pick that up now and go, this is what you need. It works. Look at the difference. And and having seen the response, in Hampshire and Isle of Wight and the ICB down there, and just already the difference we're making in such a short space of time, like over the next 3 years, it's going to be huge. And I think it will hopefully then serve as an example for sharing good practice for other ICBs, for other local authorities. And everybody talks about sharing good practice, don't they? But when you try and do that, actually, it depends on who you're sharing it with, because sometimes they're not really receptive to that. But actually, if you get on board with other places and how they're working, not just within our country, externally as well, we don't always need to just work in the same way, because we've always worked in the same way. What we do know is that way isn't working. So trying to bring some stuff in that is different, I think is really refreshing. It's really healthy, but I think is probably the most challenging part of what we do in certain areas.
Yes, definitely. But there'll always be challenge, so we've just got to move positively through it. Take everyone's, opinions on board and make a decision with what you've got in front of you. And it'll be right, or it won't. You might need to change again. You might need to switch up again later on, but just be open to and flexible.
And that's where I think, we're really lucky with kind of the directors that we've got here, in the sense that, we're leading by example. We can come into something with one view, and actually somebody sort of say, actually, no, this is the context, this is the perspective. We've not looked at it and we're all really open to that challenge and go, oh, actually, maybe I need to think a little bit differently there. And I think that's really positive, and that kind of then helps everybody else be like that.
Yeah.
And you've not always got that in the system, have you?
No.
It's very hierarchy focused. We've got our flipped kind of organisational structure where you've got, your directors at the bottom in the roots of a tree, and then all of the staff sort of in the branches, which are amazing producer Rachel, who's a talent at many things, has designed. But I was at Maiden, it was Maiden as well again last week, and they have a complete flat management structure. I loved it, and they've wrote a book. I'll have to post the link maybe on our site, and I'm going to read it when I go away. But I think that's a really interesting concept, because I think that's part of the problem in our system as well. We've noticed it become a problem here because naturally, egos get in the way. That same thing happens in the system, in schools, in social care, and because it's a natural thing that occurs. And I think that's something that maybe even looking at as a system as a whole, because I think hierarchy and structure can sometimes cause a lot of the
So is that a
systemic issues.
suggestion then that people just sort of manage themselves, or how does that work?
Apparently, yeah. So I've got to read the book, so
We'll come back
we'll
to
do another
next
podcast. We'll talk about it, yeah.
When we've rolled it out.
They're all a manager, basically. They manage themselves. They've got that autonomy. They've got that responsibility for themselves, and then nobody's there telling people what to do.
Mhm.
Because actually what you see in this system is quite a lot of that kind of people throwing the weight around a little bit, and that becoming, we see it in MDT meetings sometimes, becoming more about people's egos than actually about the child or the
Forgot
family
about
at
the
the
child,
centre.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a really good concept. And
Yeah. It'll be wild in here next podcast, though, won't it?
yeah. No one will have a manager.
Bring some of the managers in to talk about how they manage themselves.
But they all wrote the book
Yeah.
from what it looked like from their perspective, which is like the
And
balance.
that's what you need. They've done it and
Done it as a team, yeah, and it works really well.
that's good.
Yeah.
See how it goes then.
So obviously we've got our vision for change that like we can end on, and obviously we're kind of rewriting our policy paper. We're making waves in some of it. We're looking at the new regulatory framework specifically around neurodiversity and mental health. We're looking at providers being made party to proceedings in deprivation of liberty hearings, because there's lots of challenges around that. And obviously that consultation went out within an hour, had over 4,000 signatures, which is amazing. Looking forward to see the next steps of that, although we may actually achieve that much sooner if we make case law on one of the situations we've got going on at the minute. Another quite controversial thing that we're looking at doing is focusing on potentially stronger consequences for professionals that make unsafe decisions in respect of children, particularly in social care. So at the moment, if something happens in education or in health, there is a criminal consequence for those situations that can take place. That doesn't exist in local authorities for social care. And I think that's something that we potentially need to support with, because actually it may discourage, you've got situations where social workers are being made to make decisions from senior management. We've seen it play out a number of times with a couple of cases recently, and they've got no choice because they're almost forced into doing something that goes against their ethics, but also goes against their own social work code of conduct. But the consequences of that aren't actually as strong as if you were a medical professional or if you were a teacher. Which I think that's something that we need to focus on. And then there's many more, which, we're looking at in respect of, we're on our way to looking at getting our model recognised in NICE guidelines, which is really exciting, to kind of support CAMS in a much more cohesive way, removing sanction-led behaviour policies in schools and focusing on more therapeutic behaviour policies in schools and residential settings. Quite exciting time, really.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
What are your takeaways from the past 4 years? What'd you say?
Probably for myself, actually, to be more confident in my own decision making. Which I've only learned as I've gone along, and maybe thought something, maybe not said it, learned from it when it sort of played out in front of me, and saying actually I was right and I should have just gone with it in the first place. So a bit more confidence in myself and my team, really. That's changed a little bit in the last few months. Some new people in my team who've got a lot to teach me, probably, so I'm open to learning from them. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what the next 12 months bring.
And what is your sort of goals over the next year to 3 years, would you say, in your role as director?
I'm really looking forward to the change within the Hampshire Isle of Wight project on the needs-led pathway. I'm really excited for that, because we talk about diagnosis all the time and how we don't feel we need one. What do you need one for? What do you need the label for? But I understand families sometimes do need that to then get the support that the child needs, and it's such a fight just to get on the pathway, get the diagnosis, then get someone to listen. And so the needs-led pathway being a little bit more widespread across the country, really, it just makes sense to me.
I'm excited
That's
about
the bit.
Yeah, I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about the fact that we're doing it in parallel. So the diagnostic pathway and the needs-led pathway with the neurocognitive profile, because actually to be inclusive, you will need both, because
Yeah.
some people that really does matter,
They won't
the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then some people are only just trying to achieve a diagnosis because there's no other way of getting
get
support. So
need.
what I'll be interested to see is how the evidence pans out of
Mm.
how much that reduces the waiting lists, because actually people just wanted to understand their needs and get the support. So that programme where it does both, this is,
Yep.
you know, your profile. This
Just
is
about being inclusive again, isn't it? Giving people a choice.
yeah.
Do you want to? That's fine. And if you don't, also fine.
It'll be really interesting to see if that has a indirect impact then on the waiting list for diagnosis. They're so exciting that they're doing so much for us over there from like all the different angles. It's going to be so interesting to see. Exciting few years ahead.
Where we get to.
Yeah. Well, I think we wrap it up there, really. I mean, we could talk all day. Probably got about another 10 podcasts than us, to be fair. But there is a lot of information on our website about everything that we've spoken about, because I know we've touched on loads of different topics today. But yeah, thank you for listening, watching, and we'll see you again soon.
See you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's Great Minds Together podcast.
If you found this conversation valuable, please share it with others.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
You can learn more about our work and resources at greatmindstogether.co.uk and follow us on social media for regular updates.
Until next time, keep celebrating difference and driving inclusion.